Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Alex. Today, you guys, we're going to talk about immunity. So a lot of folks are asking questions about vaccines and also how to eat for your immune system. And we're going to talk about that today to help everybody out, to answer those questions and inform the selections we make at the grocery stores as people calm down and stop hoarding things so that we can all get appropriate access to resources. There are several foods that can boost your immune system, and there are specific types of elements within the foods that are important for you as well. So we're talking about collagen, amino acids, nutrients, vitamins, stuff like that. So in general, in order to have a really great immune system and give your body its best shot, what we eat is just as important as how much we are eating. Folks who have stronger immune systems are going to be able to fight off illnesses a lot better. And that's really what the Lancet article was talking about, was that of the people who had died in the studies they were looking at, 22% had diabetes, 22% had cardiovascular issues prior to getting COVID to begin with. So you are at a higher risk if you have either of those two types of medical issues, according to correlations found in that study. So the authors, remember, fully said that they just found these correlations. It's not necessarily saying that it is causative in any manner. So keep that in mind. But if you do have these cardiovascular issues or diabetes, it's an even better idea for you to be really focusing on your diet right now. And for folks who don't have these issues that put you at a greater risk or a greater risk of getting complications or a severe infection if you do come in contact with someone who has COVID-19, then it would be really great if you can leave the items on the shelf that folks who have these immune system issues could really use. That includes people who are older. We need to keep in mind people who are on specific dietary needs, like people who have cardiovascular and diabetic issues as well. In addition to all the folks who have immunity issues, so the folks who have autoimmune disorders or folks who are on chemo. A lot of people who have cancer are on specific diets as well. If you don't have someone with cancer who is close to you, then you may not already know that, but a lot of their diets are very specific because some foods have more hormones than others, and some cancers are hormone-driven or hormone-derived. So keep that in mind. Don't hoard things. It is okay. I am sure that if you need someone to bring you groceries, if you do become ill, someone will do that for you if you reach out. I would be glad to do that for people in my area, and I imagine that other folks would be glad to do that for you too. We aren't looking at a food shortage or anything, and most of these stay-at-home orders are not 100% lockdowns. You're still able to go to the grocery store, the pharmacy, gas stations, and if you are essential personnel, also to work. in most of these stay-at-home orders. So keep that in mind. We want to be rational, and we also want to be eating to give our bodies the best immune response it can have, and that goes for everyone. So keep other people in mind as well as you are looking out for you and your family during this time. So the nutrients that can really help you out the most include zinc, selenium, iron, vitamins A, B6, C, D, E, and folate. And you may also get a lot of nutrients from whole foods like goji berry, broccoli, turmeric, or green tea. Turmeric's one of my favorites. I throw that in my rice and just about anything I cook because it doesn't really have much flavor, at least to me. So that can be a good go-to. Green tea, you can drink it hot, you can drink it cold. You do you, man, and it can be really good for your immune system as well. Some of those nutrients help to reduce inflammation, just in general, but they may also help for reducing inflammation and tissue damage caused by the virus that can lead to organ injuries. Sometimes, in some people, even organ failure, like people have had trouble with their lungs because it's a respiratory disease, and also with their kidneys because with any severe respiratory disease comes a problem with getting enough oxygen to the rest of your organs. So we want to make sure we're keeping an eye out for that as well. So some of these nutrients are meant to reduce excess inflammation, and others are meant to just boost your immune system in general. We don't know enough yet to really have a comprehensive and concrete list of the best nutrients to take in combination together to counter COVID-19, but we can start with nutrients that help us maintain regular health, and then we can also look at nutrients that have really worked well for preventing or mitigating some of the effects of common colds, flus, and other types of respiratory infections. On the one hand, with restaurants closed, I know that it's difficult for a lot of folks who are not comfortable or familiar with cooking to be doing so. But on the other hand, we're all going to know precisely what's in our food right now as we are eating more at home. So if you are picking stuff up from the grocery store, I recommend picking up some foods like citrus fruits, some berries, broccoli, bell peppers, particularly the red kind, spinach. If you like mushrooms, get you some mushrooms, sweet potatoes, beans, almonds, peanut butter, turmeric, that tea we mentioned earlier, specifically green tea. It's going to be better for you if you don't put sugar in it. In my experience, jasmine green tea tastes the best. If you find Dragon Ball jasmine around you, that is my all-time favorite tea. It's very lightly floral and fragrant, but it does not have a strong flavor, and it tastes perfectly fine without sugar, in my opinion. But you can eat different types of nuts like almonds, hazelnuts, etc., beans, those legumes we've discussed in previous episodes, and also shellfish. Each time I've been to the grocery store in the past couple of weeks, which is only twice, but each time I've been, I have seen a lot of fish still available. People are going for mostly the chicken and the ground beef recently and passing over the shellfish. If you do not have a shellfish allergy or any cause to believe that you may have one, you may also find that your grocery store has a significant amount of shellfish. You can also get them in the freezer bags already if you would like to obtain them that way. You can get a lot of nutrients from these types of foods, and that is generally what is recommended as an overall approach to healthier foods. Even just making one meal per day to start with, a really healthy meal, can be really helpful right now in building your immune response and therefore also improve likelihoods of you not transmitting this illness to other people and maybe not even being symptomatic for this illness. We're going to go on a quick break, and when we come back, we are going to discuss some more dietary measures. Stay tuned.
Are you looking to learn more about the latest trends from the fitness world? Are you confused by all of the different trends that are out there? The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place for you. The GSMC Fitness Podcast is the place to come for people of all skill and interest levels. Join us as we explore the latest trends in the fitness world. Does that new exercise really work? Should I try yoga? Whatever your question, chances are good you'll find an answer on the GSMC Fitness Podcast.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about some different types of food we can eat in order to boost our immune system, and how even just slightly changing our dietary habits right now could have a cascade effect on immunity in general and prevention of the transmission of this disease. You can also take certain vitamins and micronutrients in order to boost your ability to have access to these nutrients. So in general, we do say that if you are going to be trying to get vitamins and nutrients, you should be getting as many as possible from your food and not from supplements. And that is still true in this situation. However, just like how cotton face masks are not ideal at all, and they do not prevent as much of a spread of this disease as, say, those disposable fiber masks tend to do. A mask in this situation is still better than no mask, is what a lot of healthcare and research scientists and public health officials are saying. And similarly, if you are unable to obtain those foods in the grocery store, you may be able to obtain the micronutrients. Do make sure you Google it though, and make sure you're taking the appropriate amount, as well as finding out if they are water-soluble or fat-soluble, and seeing if you should be eating and drinking with them. So when I say fat-soluble and water-soluble vitamins, what I mean is that there are two types of vitamins, and one is soluble in fats in your body. The other is soluble in water in your body. With water-soluble vitamins, they're not stored in the body. They're just excreted in your urine if you don't use them. So since your body doesn't store them, they need steady daily intake of them. So that can be in your food, preferably, or the supplements if you require it, or a combo of those two things. With your fat-soluble vitamins, those are stored in fat in your body, and if you get too many of them, if you consume more than you really need, it can lead to vitamin toxicity. So that's why we want to make sure we are taking these as needed for our bodies and not overdoing it. Be aware of how much is in your food if you're going to take vitamins ever at all as supplements, because you want to make sure that you're not overdoing it, particularly if they are these fat-soluble vitamins. They store themselves up in your liver and your fatty tissues for the most part. So that is why it's not very good to have them in huge amounts. So if your body is deficient in fat-soluble vitamins, so if you are not eating enough fat, or if your fat absorption is somehow compromised, so certain types of drugs, and by that I mean prescription medications, can interfere with the absorption of fat from your intestines, or if you have certain types of diseases that can cause an enzyme deficiency in your pancreas, then it can also mess up the absorption of fat from your intestines. So you want to be able to get these fat-soluble vitamins and make sure that you are eating enough fat in order to really process all of them. You can get them in butter, lard, vegetable oils, dairy foods, oily fish, and also from liver if you like eating organ meats. You really need to take any fat-soluble supplements with food if you're going to take supplements. Your body is not going to be able to dissolve or absorb it without it. So drink milk if you'd like. Even a glass of low-fat milk is enough to help your body absorb the vitamin. And your fat-soluble vitamins are A, D, E, and K. So from that list that we made earlier, you need A, D, and E to help you out with your immune system. K was not on that list, but A, D, and E are. So you need to definitely eat with your vitamin A, D, and E supplements. That is very important. A is very important for keeping the lining of some parts of your body, like your nose, healthy. And since this is a respiratory illness, we want to make sure that we are giving our nose as good of a chance as we can. And your nose and the lining in your nose hairs are actually a part of helping your body prevent infections to begin with. Crank out those old Magic School Bus episodes right now, you guys, while you are in stay-at-home orders and lockdowns and quarantines, and go through the immune system episodes. They are really interesting, and I think Miss Frizzle explains it in a great way that's super accessible to kids. It's also fun for adults. I still watch the Magic School Bus with the kids sometimes too. Vitamin D is going to help regulate the amount of calcium and phosphate in your body. That can be really important for your bones and teeth. And vitamin E helps your cell membranes stay protected and maintain their overall structure. So that is very important for us at this point too. And that's just a great idea to make sure you have that in your food all the time. But regardless, make sure that you are getting those with at least a glass of milk if you are going to be taking them as supplements. For the water-soluble supplements, you have C, B6, and B9, or folic acid. I know I said folate earlier. Folate is the naturally occurring form of B9 that comes in foods, but folic acid is the derived vitamin that we take, the supplementary form. While vitamin C cannot cure any type of cold or anything like that, it does help keep your immune system healthy. Your body needs it to make collagen. Collagen is a very important protein in your body that keeps your skin, bones, teeth, and your blood vessels healthy. Since this is a respiratory illness, we very much do need to keep these blood vessels healthy so that the amount of oxygen that they are able to transport is maximized from the cardiovascular perspective. We're going to give it as great of a shot as we can. Vitamin B6 does this job called being a coenzyme. So it helps chemical reactions to occur in your body. It also is really helpful in creating some of the non-essential amino acids in your body, and it helps break down glycogen. So when you intake glucose, that natural form of sugar, and you process it in your body, then you get it turned into glycogen for storage in your body. So it has to store it in a different form after it processes it. Vitamin B6 helps you to metabolize carbs too, as well as protein and fat. And it in general just keeps your immune system and your nervous system healthy. You're going to need that. The folic acid, or folate, if you are eating it naturally, works with vitamin B12 to make some healthy red blood cells for you. And your body needs folate to create DNA too. So it's very important in preventing birth defects during early pregnancy. So if you are pregnant, you have likely already heard about folate or folic acid and the necessity to take that as you are pregnant or eat enough of it when you're pregnant. But also the type of birth defects that a lack of folate can cause, or a lack of folic acid can cause, they happen during early pregnancy. So it's really important for folks to go ahead and be taking this in your diet all the time if you may become pregnant, and especially if you are seeking to become pregnant, because by the time that you realize that you're pregnant, some of those birth defects may have already had the opportunity to occur. So we all need folic acid or folate in our bodies, and it's imperative for pregnant women in particular, but it's also very important if you are thinking about becoming pregnant to have folic acid or folate in your diet. You should also be having it for your immune response. We're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about correlations from other infectious disease outbreaks and risk of becoming ill, the duration of the illness, and the risk of death when it comes to nutrition and these outbreaks. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
From previous infectious disease outbreaks, we have seen a lot of reports from scientists that folks who are malnourished have a higher risk of getting ill, being sick for longer, and also a greater risk for death. So according to a 2014 study, they found that infectious disease outbreaks can spread very quickly across the world, resulting in a pandemic like what we have now. And that historical accounts of such pandemics like those of the flu, in addition to some contemporary reports, show us that there are different social determinants of health conditions that affect the transmission of infectious diseases. And so that includes things like poverty, any other forms of inequality, whether they be income related or something else. And also any existing health disparities or inequalities can also contribute to different rates of morbidity and mortality amongst different populations. This specific study recognized that, but also sought to look at health inequalities to explain how certain areas are impacted differentially from others on the pandemic level. They also address issues in this really cool graph that they've made regarding how social position and issues of otherness like class, geography, and race in a policy context can result in other forms of disparities. So for example, if you have a large population structure that's very crowded instead of one that's either smaller or more spread out, then you have more issues with the amounts of mixing that people are coming into contact with other individuals. So cities may be impacted much differently from rural communities. Access to clean water and sanitation can impact your hand washing behavior. The ability to stay away from work or to work from home can affect your willingness to socially distance yourself, and that in combination with hand washing behavior and the population overcrowding can also lead to a differential form of exposure. So different folks in different areas being able to do what they need to do in order to not be exposed. It can happen differently for each of them. There's also psychological stress. So psychological stress and your nutritional status can impact your inflammation and your immune function, and that can also lead to differential susceptibility. So the likelihood that you're going to get this disease and the severity to which you do get it if you do become sick. So even psychological stress and nutrition as components of our health can make a large impact here. Access to health insurance and just providers of healthcare in general can impact your vaccine behavior. So whether or not you go and get yourself and your children vaccinated. A lot of folks think that it's merely a sociocultural movement that would make folks go towards more of being anti-vaxxers. But there are also economic issues at play here as well, and access issues. Just like you can have food deserts and a scarcity of good foods in your area due to your location being rural, not having enough for the population as well. Some issues are also going to socioeconomically impact folks, like, do I have enough money for this doctor's visit? Is this vaccine covered by my insurance? Am I able to borrow a car to take my child to this appointment for that? How important is this vaccine really anyway? That is what can lead people to pondering that question. It's also very similar to some of the impacts that are seen when parents are choosing whether or not to circumcise a child. Some of it is sociocultural, some of it is religious, some decisions are made on an ethical basis, but also some of them are made on an economic basis. And I know actually a few people who made that decision based on economics. Having access to these health providers and insurance can also impact your healthcare utilization. So are you going, not even just for the vaccines, but are you able to go to the doctor, especially for uncontrolled chronic conditions? That is also going to affect your susceptibility and your disease severity. We also have the quality of healthcare available to patients. So in the last example, it was, is there any healthcare even near you? Are you in essentially a healthcare desert, much like a food desert? But also, not just the quantity, the quality is important. What are the treatment options offered and available to each person? That can have differential consequences after the disease has developed. But all of these sociocultural and socioeconomic disparities can lead to different levels of illness and death amongst different groups, even within a single country, but definitely in the pandemic perspective, also between countries. This article came out in 2014 in the journal called Biosecurity and Bioterrorism, Biodefense, Strategy, Practice, and Science. So this is something that doctors and scientists have been speaking about for a long time and have been discussing in scientific circles. And they are saying that in order to handle these existing health inequalities, any underlying sociocultural determinants of health as well, that they are going to need to be studying these different demographics in order to get a better idea of which areas may be more susceptible and more prone to this type of pandemic that we're seeing today. Due to that, we really want to prioritize feeding folks who are at risk. And this goes back to me stating in a previous segment today that we really need to make sure that we are leaving the foods on the shelves that are utilized by folks who really need those specific foods because of dietary restrictions and needing the extra immune system boost, but also because nearly 30 million kids in the U.S. currently receive free or reduced price lunch, and 15 million participate in the country's school breakfast program. So for a lot of children, getting food at school is nearly 50% of the daily calories that they get to consume. With schools having to shut down because of the coronavirus pandemic, that is really problematic for 15 to 30 million children right now, not U.S. individuals or U.S. adults, 15 to 30 million kids within the United States. So when their parents go and need to buy food with food stamps or with WIC, there are certain things that they can buy and certain things they cannot. So please do go ahead and Google that and leave the things on the shelves that these other folks really need. If you need it, fine, then you need it. But if you just want it, go ahead and do the neighborly thing and maybe leave that on the shelves for everyone. Or at the very least, take only what you need. A lot of schools are closed right now in the U.S. We have about 125,000 U.S. schools closed. That includes public and private schools. A lot of kids are having to deal with food insecurity right now. So it's not just adults. We also have kids who might otherwise not be as heavily impacted by coronavirus, but whose immune systems may take a hit right now from being malnourished or undernourished at this time. We need to find a way to keep those kids fed, and even if you only do that through the inaction of leaving things on the shelves that are marked as being purchasable by WIC, etc., then that is still a step that you can take to help folks out. If you're able to do more, then definitely let's do more. Let's set up these food libraries and such. A lot of places used to have free book areas. They called them the free library. And so it would just be outside, and it's a little box, and they would put books in them, and people could take them as they needed and put more in there. You can also do that with food libraries or donating food gift cards even, like for the grocery store. That's a really great way to help people out with groceries without picking out what you think that they should have because that's not your place, or picking out, specifically what they're getting. It can be embarrassing for people for you to walk through the grocery store with them and then pay for it afterwards. So think about doing it with these cards instead, or you can go online to certain Reddit communities like Our Food Pantry, or Random Acts of Kindness, or Random Acts of Pet Food. So they even have it for pets to help you feed your pets at this time. Also to buy food for you and your munchkins. And it's totally anonymous because you go on Amazon and you make your Amazon wish list for food and then post on Reddit, and these people can go through and select it for you, just like it's a baby or a wedding registry. And they can send it to you without them ever seeing your address or you seeing their credit card information, or vice versa, and you get to already pick out what you want. So it takes a lot of the discomfort out of it, and you can buy as much or as little for folks as you want. So if you need that resource, I encourage you to check it out. And if you don't need that resource, I encourage you to check that out to see if you can help in any way. Even if you just buy them a box or two of cereal, every little bit helps. You don't have to buy their whole basket for them or their whole online cart, just whatever you can do. Someone else can do what they can as well. And in that way, as a global community, we can really help each other out. All right, we're going to go on another break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the risk of COVID-19 for folks who specifically have cardiovascular disease and diabetes.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
that are sociocultural and socioeconomic in nature that can impact folks' susceptibility to COVID-19, as well as transmissibility, as well as risk of severe illness and death. We also talked a little bit about food insecurity and how this particularly impacts young people right now who are school age. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the further risks for severe COVID-19 illness and death. So beyond just being older in general, cardiovascular disease and diabetes have also been found to be correlated with severe COVID-19 illness and death. We know, of course, that it also adversely impacts folks who have an immune system disruption or a disorder that causes a reduced ability for the body to elicit the correct immune response. However, folks who have conditions that you may not associate with immune disorders like cardiovascular disease and diabetes can also be a more severe risk. That's because these conditions weaken your heart's ability to handle stress. Diabetes also weakens your immune system, and you can learn more about diabetes in our previous diabetes episode if you're interested. Both of these diseases are associated with long-term low-grade inflammation in your entire body, and that could make COVID-19 patients predisposed to getting severe excess inflammation. And that excess inflammation contributes to lung failure and more severe cases of COVID-19, including those that lead to death. So it's very difficult to treat folks who have these disorders right now if they also get COVID-19. So just because your friend doesn't have an autoimmune disorder per se, or they're not on chemo, or they're not older, that doesn't mean that they might not also be at risk for it. We want to make sure that we're giving everyone the best chance possible. There was a report made in 2019 by the American Heart Association, and it estimated that 121.5 million adults, which is more than half of the United States adult population, has some form of cardiovascular disease. So that is over half of the United States adults, not counting the children. And 114 million more adults, which is about half of the U.S. population, have diabetes or prediabetes. So we don't know how many of those folks who have the cardiovascular issues also have a form of diabetes or prediabetes. But what we do know is that 50% or more of United States adults have either one or the other or both of these disorders. That means that 50% of the U.S. population is at a higher risk for severe COVID-19 illness and or death. Literally 50% of the United States population, around 118 million people. So if you're in a house with even just one roommate or any other person, the fact of the matter is, statistically, one of the two of you may have an increased risk for a more serious expression of COVID-19. We want to make sure that we are taking this seriously. We don't need to be scared per se, but it is serious. And as things develop, they're finding the rates at which COVID-19 can now survive on fomites, those inanimate objects we've discussed before. So they've done a few studies now with coronavirus, this specific new novel form, COVID-19, to find out how long the virus can stay stable on different types of surfaces within a controlled laboratory setting. So they overall found that you could still detect it on copper up to 4 hours after it was deposited there, either by a sneeze or a cough or a touch. It's detectable on cardboard for up to 24 hours and on plastic and steel for up to 72 hours. However, the amount of the virus that is detectable decreased very quickly over time on each of those surfaces, so the risk of infection from touching them is going to also theoretically decrease over time as well. That said, the scientists who conducted these types of studies have also stated that these were also in lab conditions, so there is no sunlight or breezes or anything else that could impact the rate at which it decreases. So that means also drying out the virus. If you dry it out either with sunshine or with air or a stiff breeze, you know what I mean, any of those things, then it could potentially dry out even quicker and make it to where there are even fewer cells of the virus that are available to be spreading that infection on those surfaces. That's really what they're getting at. Someone has also recently asked a virologist about whether or not it could be on folks' clothes, and they say that they haven't done any particular studies specifically on clothing at this time, but clothing is very thin and porous, and that if it were to stay on clothes, that they would surmise that it would be on about as long as it is for cardboard, so up to 24 hours, and that just regularly washing your clothes in a washing machine and then drying them in a dryer should remove up to all of the virus, but at the very least enough to sanitize your clothes enough that they are not infectious. So they're saying don't throw out your clothes, just go ahead, put them in the washer and dryer, and it should be fine. That is coming from the experts. So in this way, we now know that about 50% or more of the U.S. adult population may be at an increased risk of having a severe reaction to COVID-19. That's why it's so important right now that we actually perform this social distancing. I know that these stay-at-home orders and the lockdowns can be very stressful for folks. I do get that. But they are also very important to prevent folks from dying. If we all adhere strictly to them right now, then there is less of a likelihood that it is going to continue with the community spread. But if we have a chunk of people who are going out there and just ignoring it and having coronavirus parties and just still hanging with friends and family because, hey, that's my family, I know they're safe, then this really may backfire on all of us, and folks are going to be out of work for even longer. Folks are going to be having a lot more problems even finding childcare if they are allowed to go back to work at a certain point, but the kids aren't back in school at the same time. So we want to make sure that we are controlling for as many variables as possible. And the best way to do that is to make sure you're practicing these social distancing methods yourself. If you live in a house with a bunch of other people, then when you go to the grocery store, only one person needs to go. We need to limit this community spread as much as possible. Even if you aren't really feeling sick right now, it's important to just stay home and limit it. If you are feeling sick, even if you think it's just allergies or a cold, you should also do your best to stay home. You want to make sure that if you have a mild version of COVID-19, like so many people have, that you are still following social distancing. You might not be able to tell it apart from the symptoms of a mild flu or even a severe cold. Not everyone is having these shortness of breath symptoms that are causing them to have to go to the hospital and be put on a respirator. A lot of folks are just calling into their doctor and their doctor saying, okay, you need to isolate for 14 days and stay at home. That is the route that everyone is taking right now because we're trying not to overload the hospitals. And even if you personally don't have someone in your life that you are visiting or anyone in your life at all who is more prone to have a severe reaction with this disease, you can't really tell that about all of the other people in your life. Everyone carries private struggles, and you may not know that your friend is the only person right now who can go and get groceries for grandma for whatever reason, or that someone in their life has a private health issue that they've not mentioned to protect that person's privacy, and so you may unwittingly accidentally transmit this to other people. A lot of folks who have not actually traveled abroad have obtained this disease now from community spread and from folks that they know and thought would be safe in that regard. Just because you haven't traveled abroad and just because your friend hasn't traveled abroad does not mean that you and your friend cannot both get this disease and pass it on to folks who may have a stronger reaction than you do. So preventing and lessening the severity of the spread right now by participating in social distancing to the max is going to really help us reduce long-term impacts. And so is making sure that we are getting properly nourished for folks who have cardiovascular disease and diabetes in particular. A recent study has also estimated that about 45% of all cardiovascular diseases and diabetes-related deaths are directly attributable to poor diet. So even without COVID-19, another study has estimated that having an improper diet kills about 530,000 Americans annually. That's 1,500 deaths per day, you guys. So making sure that you're increasing your consumption of healthy foods is one of the top priorities for reducing cardiovascular disease and diabetes in the U.S. It's also important for a healthier food system to be created as social policy with our governments and businesses, but in particular, it's killing a lot of people just being malnourished or undernourished. And that doesn't mean with malnourishment that you're getting too few calories. That's why I'm mentioning undernourishment in the same breath. Malnourishment can also include a poor diet. So you're eating a lot of calories. Perhaps you have too many calories at that point, and so it's leading towards you being overweight. But if you don't have the correct types of calories, if you're mostly eating junk food and getting your calories from junk and from beer and everything, then that can lead to malnutrition or being malnourished. And that means bad nourishment. That's literally what the Latin for it means. So malnourishment is kind of an umbrella term for poor nourishment that can be either overnutrition, where you're getting too many calories, too many nutrients. So remember, you can get things like vitamin toxicity. There is such a thing. It's too much of a good thing. And it can also include undernutrition, where you're not getting enough of one or more nutrients. So it can go either way in that regard. But there is a difference between malnutrition and undernutrition. Either way, though, it is really bad for you regarding your immune system. Remember, those vitamins and nutrients we discussed earlier that are fat-soluble and water-soluble are very important for such things as maintaining the integrity of your cell linings and boosting your immune system and keeping different parts of your body healthy and able to combat different illnesses. So it's very important that we keep this concept of poor diet, especially as we make all of these memes and laugh at all of these jokes about running through all of our coronavirus snacks. It's important to also keep in mind what we're bringing into our homes right now. We are not able to leave very often to go and get groceries, and it's important that the nutrition that we're bringing into the house is solid nutrition. It's very good for us. It has these vitamins and minerals, and hopefully that we're getting most of our vitamins and minerals from this food that we are bringing into the house, and we're not eating things that have empty calories, because you can still be malnourished even if you are overweight and if you have a poor diet, even if you are very skinny. It's just a good reminder to keep in mind what we are putting in our bodies. We're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about effective disinfectants for using against coronavirus, as well as how that works in particular.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
nutrition as it relates to COVID-19, and specifically how issues such as poor diet, including malnutrition and undernutrition, impact people who have cardiovascular disease and diabetes regularly, but especially in the case of coronavirus. Now we're going to talk about some effective disinfectants to use against coronavirus and also why they work the way they work. I find that knowing the why can often really strengthen my decision making for certain types of issues, and it also takes a lot of the guesswork out of things, which makes me more comfortable in times of uncertainty by giving me the information to work with. So in the US, the EPA has some criteria for us based on what is important for these disinfectants to be effective against an emerging pathogen like the novel coronavirus. So this is based on which of the three types of viruses the virus is. So you have three different kinds. You have an enveloped virus, a large non-enveloped, and a small non-enveloped virus. Each of those are inactivated by disinfectants. But for a disinfectant to be considered effective against a novel pathogen, it has to demonstrate its efficacy against viruses that are harder to kill than the one that is emerging. So SARS-CoV-2 is the virus that is responsible for the COVID-19 outbreak, the coronavirus, and it is an enveloped virus, which means it is one of the easiest to kill. That is the easiest of the three types. That means that its efficacy criteria are that the disinfectant must be EPA-approved as a hospital or healthcare or broad-spectrum disinfectant. It has to carry an EPA-approved claim for at least one small or one large non-enveloped virus. And thirdly, the EPA-approved master label has to contain the emerging pathogen, quote, terms of registration, unquote, language that describes which emerging pathogen claims that manufacturer can make. Typically, it looks something like emerging viral pathogen claims, allowable and subject to the terms described in agency guidance dated August 20th, 2019, guidance to registrants, process for making claims against emerging viral pathogens not on EPA-registered disinfectant labels. This product qualifies for emerging pathogen claims against enveloped viruses, large non-enveloped viruses, small non-enveloped viruses. So that's kind of what you're looking for. I know that was a mouthful, but that is what you guys are looking for. If your disinfectant satisfies all three criteria, then the manufacturer can write that on the label using the technical literature that sounds kind of like what I just said and distribute it exclusively to healthcare facilities, doctors, nurses, or other public health officials. So they will go ahead and reach out to them for that. So say you already have some products at home and you want to know if it's an effective disinfectant for this. You can go ahead and contact the manufacturer or check their website for the disinfectants and see if they have an EPA-approved emerging viral pathogens claim. A lot of manufacturers have guidance including lists of eligible products, and when you look at their websites, make sure you look at the specific language used. It shouldn't say something like kills SARS-CoV-2 or effective against SARS-CoV-2. It needs to say what we mentioned earlier. So in that regard, you can go to EPA.gov and search for disinfectants for use against SARS-CoV-2. They have created that now, and it has an EPA registration number next to it, as well as the date in which it was enacted. You can also see if it has the emerging viral pathogen claim on there and whether or not it's dilutable and how much contact time in minutes the disinfectant agent needs to be in contact with the surface in order to work fully. So in that regard, you have a whole bunch of phenolic types of materials, and that's something important to keep in mind because if you ever take a microbiology class or an epidemiology class, then you learn about the phenol coefficient, and that is the measure of a disinfecting substance's power that is determined by dividing the number that indicates the degree of dilution of the disinfectant that will kill a microorganism, so like a virus, at any given time, by indicating the degree of the dilution of phenol that kills the microorganism under similar conditions. So if you have bleach, per se, that's taking a degree of dilution of bleach, so like 10 minutes of bleach at a certain dilution that is applied to the surface, and it kills it in 10 minutes, but maybe not in 5 minutes, per se. And then you divide that by the number that tells you how much the phenol was diluted and kills that microorganism at the same period of time under the same conditions. So your phenol is really the control variable for folks that helps determine the efficiency of all other types of biocides or envirocides, anything that is killing a microorganism, really. So if you have a phenol coefficient that's greater than 1, that means the disinfectant is more effective than phenol. If the phenol coefficient is lower than 1, that means the disinfectant is less effective than phenol. Now that is important because it's a coefficient. That's why it's greater than 1 or lower than 1. So if it takes 10 minutes for the bleach at that dilution to kill the microorganism, and it takes phenol that same 10 minutes at that dilution to go ahead and kill it, then they are directly the same. There is no difference. You can choose one or the other. But if it takes the bleach less time than the phenol at that specific degree of dilution, so how much water you've put in with either the bleach or the phenol, then it's going to mean that you are going to have a better chance at getting rid of the microorganism like coronavirus off of these surfaces with the bleach than with the phenol. So it tells you which disinfectant is more effective. That's the importance of the phenol factor. So you can read that on the labels yourself now that you know what it means, if they have it on the labels, or you can read it on the EPA website. That table is going to tell you how long in minutes you need to have that disinfectant in contact with the surface in order for it to work, and they know that by measuring it against phenol. It's pretty cool, and it provides a standard of measurement for all of these different types of infectious agents. So that's how you read that table on the EPA's website. It does say follow the disinfection directions in preparation for the following virus, and it'll say like norovirus, rhinovirus, etc. That just means that for that specific type of active ingredient, that is the type of disinfection directions and prep you're going to follow for it. Everything on this list has been shown to be effective against coronavirus. They're just setting people up for success by saying, hey, you would prepare this just like you would for adenovirus or norovirus or any of these other viruses that you are already used to having to prepare this for. So definitely check that out. I think the recommended time for a lot of Clorox wipes is keeping the surface wet for about 4 minutes. Now it should say that on the Clorox label, the bleach label, but also it's a good idea to check out the EPA's website. Those are just the general guidelines for Clorox, but that depends widely on which type of Clorox you have, if you have diluted it yourself as well. So definitely check out this list. It's quite extensive, and it will also tell you whether it's a wipe or dilutable. It has 351 entries on this page, so it will also tell you the things that are definitely not on the list. So make sure you're checking that emerging viral pathogen claim. It should go ahead and default to the ones that say yes in that column, but that is what you are looking for. Once you have that information, it will really help guide you in which products you want for this. It will also tell you the names of the actual product as well as the active ingredients and the company that makes them. So they have this all laid out for you guys, and I encourage you to go and check it out. Again, that is at EPA.gov, and it's a list of disinfectants for use against SARS-CoV-2. Make sure you do pay attention to that emerging viral pathogen claim area, and you make sure it says yes as you go along, because it will swap to no at a certain point depending on how far through the table you are looking. So just keep an eye on that. You should be all set. All right, we're going to go on another break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about disinfecting these surfaces according to the CDC.
GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast gives you advice on everything from hair to fashion to skincare products. We'll talk about the latest trends in makeup, hairstyles, and anti-aging remedies. And we'll cover all of the newest fashion trends. If you have an interest in or questions about the beauty trends that might work best for you, the Golden State Media Concepts Beauty Tips Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Beauty Tips Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Phenol and how they use it to provide a standard of measurement for agents that are meant to disinfect and sanitize against different diseases. We also went over the EPA's website and their list of the different types of cleaning agents for disinfecting against coronavirus and how long it needs to be in contact with the surface in order to work. Remember that you can't just wipe it and call it a day. It needs to be covered and wet on that surface for quite a few minutes in order to work. And the EPA website will tell you how many minutes for that. Now we're going to talk about how the CDC says we should disinfect. Now, there's a lot to learn about coronavirus, and as we go along, we learn new things. At first, they didn't think that there was any fomite transmission, and now we've discovered that it can be on surfaces like plastic and steel for up to 3 days, and it can be on surfaces like cardboard or clothing for perhaps up to 24 hours, although we can definitely go ahead and wash and dry our clothes in the washer and dryer like normal, and it not be a risk of transmission according to experts at this time. We do need to make sure, though, that when we are worried about cleaning for coronavirus, that we clean all of the surfaces within any spray of respiratory droplets. That means coughing, sneezing, etc. Remember, if someone in your house has coronavirus, they are supposed to be using a separate bathroom, if at all possible, and isolating in their room, crossing through as little of the house as absolutely possible, and that everyone else should be on a different side of the house and someone designated to bring them their meals. You also want to make sure that you are putting extra work into cleaning anything that their respiratory droplets may have come into contact with. That includes anything they may have coughed on while eating and anything like their trash as well. Anything up to 6 feet away from wherever that person coughed or sneezed may have respiratory droplets on it. So we want to frequently wash areas that have potentially been exposed. So high traffic areas. Think doorknobs when you have someone around who has coronavirus or who may have coronavirus. When we say clean, remember that if it's visibly dirty, you need to clean that first. So you have to wipe up all of the dirt or spaghetti sauce or grime first, and then go ahead and disinfect it with that substance. If it is dirty and you are trying to disinfect a dirty surface, it's not going to fully penetrate, and so you are probably going to end up with still having viral cells on that surface. If we get it cleaned up first, then we're good to go. Remember, we also don't want to mix different types of disinfectants though, and that includes mixing vinegar with some materials. I know a lot of us like to clean with vinegar, but you need to keep in mind it's not going to kill coronavirus, and mixing certain things together can create some really toxic chemicals. So if you mix bleach and vinegar together, then you can create chlorine gas that can really cause burning and watery eyes, breathing problems, and a lot of coughing. You don't want to also damage the lining of your lungs right now while you are also trying to avoid getting coronavirus. And you don't want to make anyone else in the house sick or cause them further harm. Bleach and ammonia together make chloramine. It can also cause shortness of breath and chest pain. It can make you pass out. You want to be very careful. I think that's the best well-known one for what to avoid mixing together. But for those of you who are not familiar, I'm listing it anyway. You don't want to mix bleach and rubbing alcohol together either. That creates chloroform. It's really toxic. Hydrogen peroxide and vinegar makes peracetic or peroxyacetic acid, which can also be highly corrosive. So even if you think they're two innocuous substances like hydrogen peroxide and vinegar, don't mix them together. Don't mix bleach and ammonia and everything else all together, even in little bits. You want to make sure that you are cleaning enough to be safe and disinfect, but without causing any further problems. Of course, these are good safety tips and cleaning tips for all the time and not just for coronavirus. So once you've cleaned that visibly dirty surface, and if you're already going to have to clean it with bleach to disinfect it anyway, go ahead and use the bleach in order to clean it first. Make sure you're not mixing any of these things. And just because I did not mention an interaction with another product just now does not mean that an interaction may not exist. Go ahead and Google it if you're thinking of mixing anything first. And Google it thoroughly, please. Get a couple of different answers from different folks and make sure that they have a consensus before you go through with it. If it seems confusing in any way or like people tend to disagree, don't do it. Just go ahead. If you're going to use bleach to disinfect the surface, use bleach to visibly clean it too. Make sure that you're also following online recommendations for dilution. All right, once you have that already cleaned, then if you have folks who have COVID-19 who reside in your home and may be in self-isolation, you want to make sure that you clean the area, which means removing all the dirt, the germs, and impurities from the surface. Cleaning does not kill germs. It essentially just moves them. It removes the germs from where they were, and it lowers the amount of leftover germs that you've left there. So immediately put anything you're wiping these surfaces off of, even at the cleaning stage, directly into the trash. Make sure that when you are thinking of disinfecting, that means that we are using chemicals to kill germs on a surface. So that does not necessarily clean dirty surfaces or remove germs, but it kills germs on the surface after you cleaned it. And that can also help lower the risk of spreading infection. I recommend gloves for this as well that are disposable. You need to wash your hands afterwards regardless. And when you're taking off gloves, I want you guys to take them off the healthcare/scientific way. One of the ways that they help you practice for that if you work at decomposition facilities is they will make you put these gloves on, just regular nitrile gloves or latex gloves if you're not allergic to those. And you go ahead and you put a bunch of whipped cream or a bunch of shaving cream into your palm of one hand. Then you go and you take the other hand and you're going to slip the fingers on the outside on the glove at the bottom and pull without putting your fingers up underneath it and touching your body, without touching any other parts of your skin with the glove. So you're going to take that and pull it up and inside out. Then with the clean interior of the glove that you've just pulled off, when it's at the edge of your fingers but not pulled all the way off, you're going to slip that and grab the other glove and turn it inside out. So what you should then have are two gloves inside out, one within the other, that went through that naturally. Don't try cramming the gloves inside of each other. It's okay if you get that wrong the first couple of times, but you want to definitely still wash your hands afterwards, just in case. The point of the shaving cream or the whipped cream is to show you where the actual potential germs would be, and that helps guide you in your methods for taking them off. Take them off slowly. Don't rip them off either. We want to make sure that you are getting the maximum usage out of these gloves, the maximum protection. They're not PPE or personal protective equipment if they are not protecting your person through incorrect usage. So be mindful of that. Clean, frequently touched surfaces and disinfect them. That includes tables, doorknobs, light switches, handles, desks, toilets, faucets, sinks, anything else that they are using as well. And do that with household cleaners and EPA-registered disinfectants. That is also according to the CDC, and I gave you guys that list of disinfectants earlier. Make sure you follow the label instructions. Just like nutrition and food, we want to read the labels for these disinfectants. They have instructions for safe and effective use in cleaning these products, any precautions you should take, like wearing gloves, and it will probably remind you to make sure you have good ventilation while using that product. You do not want to essentially get high and dizzy and lightheaded from using so much of these cleaning products. It would be very bad for you to pass out at this point. Think about the person who has COVID-19 and is in your care, in addition to thinking about who would help you in the situation if you were to suddenly pass out. How capable is everyone else in the house? In general, let's just be very cautious, even when we're doing things that we consider normal, like cleaning stuff and disinfecting things. We want to make sure that we're not causing more of a healthcare overflow by getting sick doing things that we should not be doing because we just weren't being cautious enough. We want to give the healthcare industry the best shot they can right now of saving as many people as they can by all being mindful, even in the things that we tend to take for granted and do daily. In addition to cleaning and disinfecting high-touch surfaces, you also want to make sure you go to the CDC website and read their guidelines for the symptoms and spread of COVID-19 in homes. Sit down with your family and go over it together. We talked about that in one of our recent podcasts and how knowledge in this case is being both forewarned and forearmed, and in turn also helping to reduce and prevent panic. If you don't have a separate bathroom available, make sure you clean and disinfect the bathroom after each use by an ill person. So the folks who are quarantined with them rather than the ill person in isolation should be cleaning and disinfecting it after each use. If that's not possible, then the caregiver needs to wait as long as practical after use to clean and disinfect those high-touch surfaces. Remember, steel and plastic up to 72 hours, so up to 3 days after that person has last used the bathroom. But also keep in mind that the longer it sits, then the fewer viral cells there will be. So do what you can and just do your best. That is all any of us can do right now. No one expects you to go out and find a separate home to live in while that person is in isolation. Just do your best. Read up on the list of disinfectants. Work on your nutrition as well. And try your best to follow the CDC and EPA guidelines. When you're cleaning these surfaces, once you are done with the gloves and you are discarding them after each cleaning, wash your hands. If you have to use reusable gloves, make sure you dedicate those to cleaning and disinfecting surfaces for COVID-19. Make sure that you're not touching the outside of them when you take them off or put them on, because then the next time you put your hands in there, it's going to be a problem. If you're going to use bleach, then use a bleach solution that is 5 tablespoons or 1/3 of a cup bleach per gallon of water, or 4 teaspoons of bleach per quart of water. Those are the CDC recommended guidelines. For disinfecting surfaces, they want you to use an alcohol solution that has at least 70% alcohol. They say that most common EPA-registered household disinfectants should be effective, and you can check the EPA website just in case. Make sure your products are also in date. You want to make sure that it is not past its expiration date. It may be less potent. And messing with its potency is not something we really want to do right now because that's not ensured to be effective. If you are going to use a different type of product, make sure you use the ones with the EPA-approved emerging viral pathogens claims that we discussed. Make sure the products you're using are appropriate for the surfaces you're trying to clean. If you have a soft, porous surface like carpet or rugs, drapes, make sure you remove any visible contamination if there is any present, so a snot rocket or anything like that, and then clean it with appropriate cleaners that say you can use them for those surfaces. And check the EPA website for those as well. Afterwards, launder those however the manufacturer has instructed you to. So if it's something you can toss into the washing machine, go for it at that point. If it is not something you can toss in the washing machine, launder it however the manufacturer has instructed. If you can, wash that material using the warmest appropriate water setting for those items and dry them completely. You want to make sure that you are all set. If you're doing towels, clothing, linens, or other items that go in the laundry, wear those disposable gloves when handling your laundry, or those reusable gloves in the way that we discussed earlier, and make sure you're not using the same gloves for your laundry and for cleaning the bathroom, etc. You want to make sure that these are dedicated just for COVID-19 and you don't use them for any other household purposes. If you are holding a spray bottle or anything else that is not going in the laundry while you're wearing those gloves, that should only be touched from then on with gloved hands. Regardless of whether or not you're wearing gloves to do this laundry, you need to wash your hands afterwards. Remember, 20 seconds minimum, and make sure that you're getting in between your fingers. A lot of it is friction that helps get this stuff off. If possible, don't shake your dirty laundry. That'll keep you from dispersing the virus into the air if it is on any of the clothing. Follow the manufacturer's instructions, and you can also wash the dirty laundry from an ill person with other people's items. They don't anticipate that really being a problem. You can clean and disinfect clothes hampers according to the guidance above for all surfaces, so if they're porous, etc., go from there. You can also place a bag liner that's disposable or can be laundered in there too. But again, if it's a mesh bag, then you're still going to need to clean the rest of the internal surface of the laundry hamper. Household members, just clean your hands often. Wash them after you blow your nose, cough, sneeze, after you use the restroom, before eating or preparing food, after contact with pets or animals, and before and after providing routine care for anyone else in the house who needs assistance. That includes children. So you're just making sure that you are washing your hands before you touch anything that could potentially infect another person. Think of it as rather than trying to avoid contracting the disease, you're trying to avoid transmitting it. Act like you already have it and are making sure that you don't pass it to somebody else. If the person who is ill is in the home with everyone else, make sure they eat in their room if possible. It's preferable to handle their non-disposable food service items with gloves and wash them in hot water or in a dishwasher. Then clean your hands after handling those food service items. You should definitely dedicate a lined trash can for the ill person. Don't just give them an empty trash can, put the bag in it and everything. And use gloves when you remove the garbage, handle and dispose of the trash. If you live in an apartment complex or somewhere where someone else is handling all this trash for you, like they're physically having to move it and it's not just a truck dumping it into the back of the bin, make sure that you definitely let your apartment complex know that you are ill, or the people who are going to be having to handle your trash know that you are ill. That way, you're not unnecessarily spreading this to other people. You can also contact your local health department about trash disposal guidance if you live in an area where people have to come and pick up your trash and you want to make sure everyone is aware of it. You may have specific local ordinances as well put in place for this case. So that's always a good idea to reach out and find that out from them, to let them know if you or someone else in the home is ill, and then let your friends and family and neighbors know. Let the people in your community know that this is what they need to do. Spread that information. It may not occur to them to reach out to the health department or to worry about trash disposal guidance. Hit up your local health department and share the information with those around you when you know that that information came from solid, reputable sources. That way, we go forward only having informed opinions and also working with as much knowledge as possible to prevent the spread of this disease together. All right, guys, that's all I have for you today. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Health and Wellness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask you to remember to subscribe to the show, and writing a nice review always really helps us. Also, if you could please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, I'd appreciate it. Thank you kindly, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Health and Wellness Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.